Coming up, starts and sits in 60 minutes with the Fantasy Greek.
Baby, you're a mystery. Tell me what's a girl gotta do? Looking at the history doesn't seem to give any clue. Just when I think I understand it all, you seem to unravel some more. Ooh, la, la, ooh, I never know nobody like you. Ooh, la, la, ooh, now, now I know. Baby, you're an enigma. Ooh, la, la, ooh, na, 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 oh. Yeah, you keep me guessing on confessing now, well, baby, it's true. I never know nobody like you. Baby, you're an enigma. Baby, you're a riddle. I'm caught up in the middle of you. I'm trying to think bigger, but I can't seem to figure it through. I wanna make it better, but now I'm scared of looking a fool. Oh, baby, no, I've never been very good at playing it cool. Just when I think I understand it all, I find I know nothing at all. I never know nobody like you. Ooh, na, na, ooh, now, now I know. You're an enigma. Ooh, na, ooh, na, 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 oh. Yeah, you keep me guessing, I'm confessing now, baby, it's true. I never know nobody like you. Baby, you're an enigma. Ooh, baby, you're an enigma.
Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now. At LateNightSportsRadio.com.
Come on, let's go. Yeah, let's go. All right, okay. All right, okay. Return to the Mac. Get up what it is, what it does.
All right, okay. It's that time of the week again, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Fantasy Greeks. Starts and sits in 60 minutes. I'm Keith Grieve from 87sportsfans.com. Joining me is the Fantasy Greek himself, Jim Sarantias. Follow him on Twitter at the Fantasy Greek. Jim, happy Wednesday.
Keith, happy Wednesday to you. Now, let me start off by saying that introduction, that whole ensemble was all pro. Just all pro.
Oh, hey, thanks. I appreciate that. I like it when you make me feel good.
You know, I do my best because it's usually not very often.
That's where I was going. But anyway, folks, this is our weekly show where we go through each NFL matchup and one by one and give you the fantasy highlights, starts, and players you should also avoid like the plague. If at any time you feel like breaking the monotony and asking us your personal lineup questions, the number is 585-633-7487, 585-633-7487. So, the one good thing about this program is that we are free to criticize Roger Goodell all we want, unlike Bill Simmons, but we won't get into that now. We are purely focused on this week's NFL matchups and giving you our picks because we know you have been dying since Monday night's game ended to hear what we had to say this week. And so, without further ado, let's launch into it. The Thursday night game, the New York Giants traveling to the Washington Redskins. Well, what can you say? The Giants get off the schneid, get in the win column. No one's really saying that their season's going to turn around, but they go to a Redskins team that is, well, they were floundering until all of a sudden Kirk Cousins came on the scene and throwing the ball left and right. The big problem that I have with the Redskins is that I feel like there's another shoe waiting to drop. As soon as the tape catches up with Kirk Cousins, that's just kind of where I'm at right now. The Giants' defense has been better than they have been in previous years, although they have struggled, execution-wise in pass coverage. But the Redskins are what I like to call good enough, and their offense right now can score a lot of points. And even though the Giants may be on the rebound, I'm not ready to put all my faith in Eli Manning yet. I'm taking the Redskins at home.
Yeah, buddy, I'm doing the same thing. For me, it's much more difficult to envision the Giants being the better of these two teams, at least at this point. They got their first win in Week 3. In the first 2 weeks of the season, they absolutely struggled. Now, for fantasy purposes, as you and I talk about these 13 games this week, I do want to point out that some of the players we might mention, this is just a tough week to play people. And what I mean by that is you might have to play some players you probably don't want to. Unless you had a stellar draft or worked that waiver wire really well, or in a smaller league and you have, let's say, 3 quality running backs and you only have to play 2, you may have to play a running back you just don't want to. So that's the kind of week we're talking about. And to get started, let's talk a little bit about the quarterback situation for these two teams. Eli Manning is coming off his best game of the season, which wasn't the greatest. Let's say it was 250 yards, 2 TDs. But he's heading into a league rivalry against a team that it's their weakness. The passing game is their weakness, and you kind of expect him to step up to the plate in this one. But for fantasy purpose, he's not a must-start, but he's a low or high QB2, meaning you might have to play him as your bye-week player. Okay? But then you got Kirk Cousins on the other hand. This guy is just killing it. In 2 games, he's averaged 335 yards and 2.5 touchdowns per game. That's 2.5, Keith. And just 1 interception during that time. So, I mean, to me, Kirk Cousins is definitely a QB1. He's probably a mid to lower QB1. And if you have him as your backup, or if you're just outright starting him, feel good about it this week. In terms of running backs, Alfred Morris is definitely a must-start. The matchup works right for him. Rashad Jennings, on the other hand, who's coming off this tremendously great game, he's got a tough matchup. The Redskins don't give up that many fantasy points to the position. But on the flip side to all this, I think you got to play him if you got him. Rashad Jennings was always, even when he was with the Raiders, he was sort of a matchup-proof running back. I mean, let's say he gets you 60, 80 all-purpose yards, but gets you a TD or 2, you'll be happy with that. That's the kind of running back he is, and I think he's one of those players that fits into that, God, it's not the greatest matchup, but you got to play him this week. That's okay. On the wide receiver end, you got to love Pierre Garçon, and you got to love Deshaun Jackson. They are thriving with Kirk Cousins at the helm. You must start these players, both as wide receiver 2s. On the Giants, the only one worth playing right now is Victor Cruz, and Odell Beckham can't get on the field fast enough. At the tight end position, I like both Larry Donnell and Paul Niles this week as sort of, low TE1, somewhere ranked, let's say, TE number 7 and number 8 or so in the rankings. Get those guys out there. And if you really need a defense, you're desperate for a defense, how about them Redskins? I would play them against the Giants just because they've imploded a little bit and they can implode again. And that's what I got, Keith. Redskins at home.
It works for me. The next game up on the slate is the Miami Dolphins traveling to the Oakland Raiders. The Dolphins have been an absolute mess, and there is now talk of a change of quarterback in Ryan Tannehill. Why is there talk? Because head coach Joe Philbin won't commit to Ryan Tannehill being the starter. Not exactly signs of peace and paradise in Miami. Everyone is waiting for them to take the next step. They just don't seem to want to do it. For the Raiders, there is absolutely nothing going on in Oakland except Derek Carr. And he's played good, but he just doesn't have the supporting cast around him. And the Dolphins have talent, and they're just waiting for a game to put it all together. And this game could go either way. Either we talked about it on Monday night. The Dolphins are either ripe for the Raiders picking, or the Raiders are either ripe for the Dolphins picking. And I think that the Dolphins have a little bit more around their quarterback than the Raiders do. I'm taking Miami on the road in this.
Keith, you're absolutely right. This was a tough one when we discussed it on Monday night on our 87 Sports Fan show. Put it this way. I do every week on the fantasygreek.com. You get our game previews when you're a member of Skybox. You also get what I call the winners table. It lists every winner, links to the game previews, and I also give them confidence points. And this one is either my least confident or second least. It's difficult for me. But where I'm getting hooked up here is sort of the matchups. The Oakland Raiders have one of the better pass defenses in the league. In fact, they allow the 7th least fantasy points to quarterbacks and the 4th least fantasy points to wide receivers. So while I think Mike Wallace is worth a WR2 or wide receiver 3 play, it's not a good matchup for the guy. So if you're playing him because you just have to. I'd stay away from Ryan Tannehill if I could. But on the other hand, Lamar Miller, I think this is a great matchup for him. The Raiders are giving up the 5th most fantasy points. The point is going to be, are the Dolphins going to focus on running the football this weekend? Oh, and by the way, it's in London. And that I just can't tell you. Now, when you flip it over to the Raiders side, Derek Carr, he's been doing pretty well. He's a rookie quarterback that can score you a couple TDs, and what matches up well for him is his running backs against this Dolphins defense. They allow the 5th most fantasy points to running backs. So guys like Maurice Jones-Drew, who I think is going to be healthy enough to play this weekend, and Darren McFadden, they're posing as decent flex plays this weekend. They may not be good RB2s, but decent flex plays, so you can use them that way. And I think that this is a Raiders team that defensively and offensively is going to do enough to sneak out the win overseas across the pond.
All right, the Green Bay Packers travel to our beloved Chicago Bears. The NFL's oldest rivalry takes center stage yet again. The Bears holding on to a contested game in the Meadowlands, but they have won 2 straight road games on opposite coasts. You got to tip your cap to them. And the Packers lost a game that I think they could have won, or should have won anyway, against the Detroit Lions. As the season goes on, we'll find out whether the Lions are really that good or the Packers were that bad in this contest. But that being said, for all of the Packers' deficiencies on defense, they are usually pretty good on offense, but the Lions may have had the recipe to thwart them. The problem is that the Bears are awfully banged up. They played admirably against the Jets with losing 3 safeties. And as we wait to see what the final tally is going to be as far as who can actually make it to the field on Sunday night, there are some big question marks there. Kyle Fuller, rookie cornerback Kyle Fuller, stepping in for the injured Charles Tillman, looks like the real deal in back-to-back weeks. They will need him. This game very well could be a 38-35 shootout. And it's a rivalry game. Everything else goes to the sidelines, and I will always like to take the home team. I'm taking the Bears.
And Keith, I couldn't agree with you more. I think this is going to be that shootout. You picked 38-35. I say 28-31, whatever. All I know is that this is for fantasy football managers. This is going to be a game that has talent galore and fantasy point fodder everywhere for the taking. So what you want to do is you want to get all your playmakers started. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers, he's a weekly must-play, but in Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb. For the Bears, I like Jay Cutler as a top 10 option this week. If you have him, you can confidently play him for any of the quarterback that has a bye this week. Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, you can't bench those guys. And you can't bench Martellus Bennett. I remember noticing that the Packers give up, not the least, but one of the, let's say, top 5 least fantasy points to tight ends. But, Martellus Bennett has been matchup proof. I mean, give him 50 yards and 2 TDs. I'll take that as a manager of Martellus Bennett on my team. So,